Reading by Edmond, The Secret History of the Jesuits. We are in chapter 23. And I tell you, it's so strange. This book is just amazing because some chapters take forever and a day. Some chapters is only like 10 minutes long. Crazy, huh? This one isn't a long chapter either. Chapter 23. The First World War. To the fury arose at the Vatican by the Franco-Russian alliance and shone so well in the Dreyfus affair, to the anger which the Franco-Italian Union incited and to which the Lobet incident clearly testified, was added a bitter resentment caused by the ante cordiale with England. France had firmly decided not to stand alone opposite her formidable neighbor and Austria-Hungary. Politics, so blind and ill-considered, according to Monsignor Cristatini, were looked upon most unfavorably by the Catholic Holy of Holies. For, besides jeopardizing the thorough bleeding godless France needed, these politics were a priceless support for schismatic Russia, this lost sheep whose return to the Roman Catholic fold had never ceased to be hoped for, though its accomplishment might mean a war. But for the time being, the Orthodox Church stayed firmly implanted in the Balkans, especially in Serbia, where the Treaty of Bucharest ended the conflict of the Balkans and had made it a center of attraction for the Slavs of the South, and in particular for those under the yoke of Austria. The ambitious plans of the Vatican and the apostolic imperialism of the Habsburgs were then in perfect accord as in the past. To Rome and Vienna, the growing power of Serbia marked her out as the enemy to overthrow. This is established in a diplomatic document found in the Austrian-Hungarian archives. It reports, for the benefit of the Austrian minister Berchtold, on the talks Prince Schönberg had at the Vatican in October-November 1913. Amongst the subjects discussed, first of all, with the Cardinal Secretary of State, Mary Delval, last week, the question of Serbia came up as anticipated. First of all, the Cardinal expressed his joy at our firm and opportune attitude of recent months. Quote, during the audience I had that day with His Holiness, the Holy Father, who started the conversation by mentioning our energetic steps taken in Belgrade, he made some characteristic remarks. It would certainly have been better, said His Holiness, if Austria-Hungary had punished the Serbians for all the wrongs they had done, unquote. So the warlike sentiments of Pius X were clearly expressed in 1913 already. There is nothing surprising about this when we consider the inspirers of Roman politics. What was the Habsburgs supposed to do? Chastise Serbia, an Orthodox nation? The prestige of Austria-Hungary, of these Habsburgs, who, with the Bourbons of Spain, were the last supporters of the Jesuits, and especially the prestige of the heir, Francisco Ferdinand, their man, would have been greatly increased. For Rome, the affair became one of the most religious importance. A victory of apostolic monarchy over Tsarism could be considered as a victory of Rome over the schism over the schism of the East. However, the affair dragged on in 1913, but on the 28th of June, 1914, the Archduke Franciscus Ferdinand was murdered at Sarajevo. The Serbian government had nothing to do with this crime committed by Macedonian student, but it was the perfect excuse for the Emperor Francisco Joseph to start hostilities. Yeah, that's a good way to start that. Hold on, I think these pages are stuck. 64. Nope. Okay. Count Forza maintains that the main problem was to persuade Francisco Joseph that war was necessary. The advice of the Pope and his minister was the one which could best influence him. This advice was, of course, given to the emperor and of the kind which could be expected from his Pope and his minister, favorite pupil of the Jesuits. While Serbia was trying to maintain peace by giving in to all the wishes of the Austrian government, which had sent a threatening note to Belgrade, Count Palfi, Austrian representative to the Vatican, gave to his minister Berchtold on the 29th of July a summary of the talks he had on the 27th with the Cardinal Secretary of State, Mary del Valle. This conversation was about the questions which are disturbing Europe at the moment. The diplomat scornfully denies the fanciful rumors about the supposed intervention of the Pope, who apparently implored the emperor to spare the Christian nations the horrors of war. Having dealt with these absurd suppositions, he expounds the real opinion of the cura as conveyed to him by the Secretary of State. Quote, it would have been impossible to detect any spirit of indulgence and consolation in the words of His Eminence. It is true that he described the note to Serbia as very harsh, but he nevertheless approved of it entirely, and at the same time, and indirectly expressed the wish that the monarchy would finish the job. Indeed, added the cardinal, it was a pity that Serbia had not been humiliated much earlier, as it could have been done then without such great risks attached. This declaration echoes the wishes of the Pope, who, over the past few years, often expressed regret that Austria-Hungary had neglected chastising her dangerous neighbors on the Danube. Unquote. This indeed is just the opposite to the fanciful rumors about a pontifical intervention in favor of peace. In fact, the Austrian diplomat is not the only one who reports on the real opinion of the Roman pontiff and his minister. The day before, on the 26th of July, Baron Ritter, Bavarian charge d'affaires to the Vatican, had written to his government, quote, the Pope agrees with Austria dealing severely with Serbia. He doesn't think much of the Russian and French armies and is of the opinion that they could not do very much in a war against Germany. The Cardinal Secretary of State doesn't see when Austria could make war if she does not decide now. Unquote. So the Holy See was fully conscious of the great risk represented by a conflict between Austria and Serbia, but nevertheless did all in its power to encourage it. The Holy Father and his Jesuit counselors were not concerned about the sufferings of Christian nations. It was not the first time that these nations were used for the benefit of Roman politics. The opportunity wished for had come at last to use the Germanic secular arm against Orthodox Russia, godless France, which needed a thorough bleeding, and as a bonus against heretic England. Everything seemed to promise a lively and happy war. Pius X did not see its unfolding and result, both contrary to his forecast. He died at the beginning of the conflict on the 20th of August, 1914. But 40 years later, Pius XII canonized this august pontiff, and the summary of the Holy History used for parochial catechism dedicated to him these edifying words, quote, Pius X did all he could do. No, I'm sorry. Quote, Pius X did all he could to prevent the start of the 1914 war, and he died of anguish when he foresaw the sufferings it would unleash. What liars? Huh? Unquote. If this was satire, it could not be put in a better way. A few years before 1914, M. Goyat, a true prophet, said, quote, "If war breaks out, listen, you men who think that the Roman Church is the symbol of order and peace and do not search for blame outside of the Vatican. It will be the sly instigator as in the War of 1870." Unquote. Instigator of the slaughter, the Vatican was going to uphold no less craftily her Austro-German champion right through the war. The military excursion in France, which the Kaiser boasted he was going to make, was stopped at the Marne, and the aggressor brought back to the defensive after every one of his furious attacks. But at least pontifical diplomacy brought him all the help possible. And this is not surprising when we consider that divine providence seemed to delight in favoring the central empires. Indeed, Cardinal Rampollo, considered to be pro-French, and for that reason kept away the pontifical throne on a veto from Austria, wasn't any more amongst those who could become pope, as he had died a few months before Pius X, a death, it seems, very opportune. But this was not the whole of God's intervention, as he had promised even before voting had taken place. The new Pope, Benedict XV, appointed Cardinal Ferretta as Secretary of State. But the cardinal, who was not very friendly towards the Jesuits, did not even have the time to take up fully his new position. Having entered the secretary's office at the end of September 1914, he died suddenly on the 20th of October, victim of a terrible indisposition after partaking of some light refreshments. And these are all in bold letters, so obviously he was killed. He was sitting at his desk when he suddenly became violently sick. He fell as if lightning had struck him. The servants hastened to come to his help. The doctor, who had been called immediately, realized straightway the gravity of the situation and asked for a quick consultation. As for Ferretta, he had already understood and knew there was no hope. He pleaded that he should not be left to die at the Vatican. The medical consultation took place immediately at his hotel with 6 doctors. They refused to draw up a medical bulletin. The one published bore no signatures. He was not suffering from any kind of sickness or infirmity. The scandal of this death was such that an inquest could not be avoided. The rest of it was a jar had been broken at the office. Not the rest. The result of it was a jar had been broken at the office. The presence of pounded glass in the sugar bowl used by the cardinal was explained quite simply in that way. Granulated sugar can be useful. The inquest was stopped there. Wow. That is insane. The Abb Daniel adds that the sudden departure, a few days later, of the servant of the deceased cardinal provoked quite a lot of remarks, especially as he had apparently been the servant of Monsignor von Gerlach before his master entered holy orders. This Germanic prelate, a notorious spy, was to flee from Rome in 1916. He was going to be arrested and charged with the sabotage of the Italian battleship Leonardo da Vinci, which blew up in the Bay of Taranto, taking with it 21 officers and 221 seamen. Really? Leonardo da Vinci, not Leonardo, I'm sorry. It's Leonardo da Vinci, which blew up in the Bay of Taranto. His trial was resumed in 1919. Von Gerlach did not appear and was condemned to 20 years hard labor. Through the case of this participating Chamberlain, editor of the Azevedo Romano, we get a clear idea of the state of mind in the Vatican's high sphere. It is again the Abbé Birregget who describes the entourage of the Holy See, professors or ecclesiastics. They are not put off by any obstacles in their pursuit of impressing on the Italian clergy and the Catholic world in Rome respect and admiration for the Germanic army, contempt and hatred for France. Ferrata, who favored neutrality, had died just at the right time, and the Cardinal Gasperi became Secretary of State in perfect agreement with Benedict XV. He did his best to serve the interest of the Central Empires. Considering all this, it is not surprising, then, that Pope Benedict XV in the following months worked hard to maintain Italy on the path of intervention, which would best serve the Jesuits, friends of the Habsburgs. At the same time, the morale of the Allies was cunningly undermined. On the 10th of January 1915, a decree signed by Cardinal Gasperi, Secretary of State to Benedict XV, ordered that a day of prayer should be observed to hasten peace. One of the compulsory exercises of piety was the reciting of a prayer written by Benedict XV himself. The French government ordered that the pontifical document should be seized. This prayer for peace was considered to be a softening and destructive manifestation capable of slackening the efforts of our armies at a time when the German hordes were feeling the irresistible pressure, which would push them out of their territory, and when the Kaiser could see coming the terrible punishment his unpardonable crimes deserved. The Pope, it was said, wanted peace, come what may, at a time when it could only be in favor of the Central Empires. The Pope does not like France. He is German. M. Charles Lederer, another Catholic writer, confirms, quote, on 2 occasions mentioned in some famous articles of La Revue de Paris, the Holy See, by inviting Italy and later the United States to keep out of the war, did not merely wish for a quicker end of the conflict. According to the Abbé Birregget, it served the interest of our enemies and worked against us, unquote. But the actions of the Jesuits, therefore the actions of the Vatican, were not only felt in Italy and the United States. Any means, every place is good enough for them. It is not surprising, then, to see pontifical diplomacy busy from the start at hindering our food supply, dissuading the neutrals from joining our side in order to break the bond holding the enity together. Nothing was considered too insignificant if it could help this great task and bring about peace by provoking some weakness amongst the allies. There was worse solicitations for a separate peace. Between the 2nd and the 10th of January 1916, some German Catholics went to Belgium to preach, in the name of the Pope, they said, a separate peace. The Belgian bishops accused them of lying, but the nuncio and the Pope remained silent. Then the Holy See thought of bringing together France and Austria, so hoping to make France sign a separate peace or demand that, with her allies, they should negotiate a general peace. A few weeks later, on the 31st of March, 1917, Prince Sixte of Bourbon gave the famous letter of the Emperor Charles to the President of the Republic. Quote, as the maneuver had failed on this side of the Alps, it was bound to be tried again elsewhere in England, in America, and especially in Italy. Break up the temporal forces of the enity in order to stop its offensive attacks, ruin its moral prestige with the view to weaken its courage and bring it to terms. These two things make up the politics of Benedict XV, and all the efforts of his impartiality always have been and are still aimed at hamstringing us, unquote. This was written by a notorious Catholic, M. Louis Kennett, and this is what the Ab Burget wrote, quote, "We only learned 4 years later through the declaration of M. Erzberger, published in the Germania of the 22nd of April, 1921, that the proposal of peace proclaimed by the Pope in August 1917 had been preceded by a secret accord between the Holy See and Germany," unquote. Another interesting point is that the ecclesiastical diplomat was negotiated this secret accord was the nuncio in Munich, Monsignor Pacelli, future Pius XII. One of his apologists, R.P. Jesuit Furnisol, wrote, quote, "On the 28th of May, 1917, Monsignor Pacelli presented his letters of appointment to the King of Bavaria. He tried hard to enlist the cooperation of William II and the Chancellor Bethmann Hollweg. On the 29th of June, Monsignor Pacelli was solemnly received by the Emperor William II at the headquarters of Kreuznach, Kurzanech. So the future Pope was starting his 12 years as nuncio in Munich, then in Berlin, in the way he meant to go on. For during those years, he multiplied the intrigues to overthrow the German Republic established after the First World War and prepared the revenge of 1939 by bringing Hitler to power. Whoa. Huh. Yet when the Allies signed the Treaty of Versailles in July 1919, they were so conscious of the part played by the Vatican in the conflict that it was carefully kept away from the conference table. And even more surprising, it was the most Catholic state, Italy, which had insisted on its exclusion. Through art, 15th of the Pact of London, 26th of April, 1915, which defined Italy's participation in the war, Baron Sannino had obtained the promise from the other allies that they would oppose any intervention of the papacy in the peace arrangements. This measure was wise but insufficient. Instead of applying the sanctions against the Holy See, which it deserved for the sparking off the First World War, the victors did nothing to prevent the further intrigues of the Jesuits and the Vatican. These eventually, 20 years later, led to a catastrophe even worse, maybe the worst the world has known. And that ends chapter 23. There's a lot of things. People were wicked, just wicked. I wanted to see because I seen that there's somebody was talking here. I don't know, Chris, about that. Yeah, these books are amazing. I do enjoy these books greatly. I wish I understood them a little bit more, but like I said, and I really suggest you guys do the same. Go back, listen to it from the very beginning, because when we're jumping back in the middle of the book, we don't know what's here or there. Go back, listen to it from the beginning. I'm going to do that myself. I may listen to it tonight as I rest, but I'm going to stop this reading for now. We will pick up in chapter 24. I'm not going to say we'll do it tomorrow, because if tomorrow comes, well, I'm not saying it's not coming, but if something may happen tomorrow and I can't get to it. So I am going to do my very best, though, to finish this book. It would be the Lord's will. And I'm going to pick up and begin the New Testament today out of the 1611 Bible. All right, brothers and sisters, keep your eyes on Jesus, your nose in the book, which is the Word of God, and embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived. I want to show you guys something. Look at this. Look at that one. I got these kitties about a month ago because I just got lonely. Aren't they just cute? They can be a pain, but it's all right. All right. I love you all. Bye-bye.